Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Otto's Garage. Okay, so some of you may have seen the clip of the Prisma parked up behind the trailer with the hazard lights going, following the Cambelt snapping disaster. So that was on Wednesday night. We were geared to go to Lowton Park on the Saturday, and this is basically our attempt at rescuing the event. So we're going to take the head off, we're going to have a look at the valves. We've got some new valves lined up. We've got a new cam belt obviously, and a couple other bits and bobs to try and get the car ready for its first hill climb, Lowton Park, 5th of April 2025. So the car's up on the ramp. We've basically stripped off the front bumper, the intercooler, going to take the radiator out. We're going to take the head off so we can just see what's going on in there. But basically it's getting all of the little ancillaries disconnected, so we've got a clear run to get that head removed. Right, it's about an hour in, we're progressing nicely. Let's just have a look and see what we've done. So I've now removed the radiators and all of the intercooler pipe work there. It's obviously all drained, so the water's all gone out of it. We've taken off the thermostat housing unit and disconnected all of the throttle work as well, just trying to ease that back out of the way. I'm trying to keep as much of the connections still on the car as possible really, and just try and loosen off the main parts so that we can make it a bit easier to put it back together. The next thing I'm going to tackle is under here the bolts which are holding on the exhaust manifold. I may have to loosen off the exhaust on this one, but we'll just see where we get to on that. The steady bar up there, that's all been unbolted, and then we've got a bit of work to do round the back on the manifold. Right, just cracked the head off, and this is what we found inside. So there's the head, and if we have a look over at the pistons, we've been bloody lucky because we've got a very slight mark on this one, and I think there's a bit of a mark on that one there as well, but the walls are good. We've got no hideous snapped off valves in anything, so I think we've basically got away with it. So what we'll do is we'll just turn the motor over a little bit, and then we can just check the bores on these two cylinders as well. So looking at the head from this side, the valves are really good, and we've done a test. So what we've done is we've closed the valve, tipped the head over, and we filled petrol into the port and checked that we haven't got any leaks, and presto, there are no leaks on any of the valves. No petrol's coming past them at all. So I'm just going to leave well alone, and we're going to rebuild it as it is, and happy days indeed. Very lucky. What I've had to do over here is fit a new improved head gasket on that, and cleaned up some of this contamination on this gasket which was on the inlet valve, inlet manifold. Exhaust manifold, quite straightforward, and she's now ready for the head to go back on the block. Kaboosh! Hey, I just found this from yesterday. Bacon and egg sandwich from Greg's. Warm it up now. 24 hours old. Right, it's another day, and it's probably about 5 hours until we have to get the car over to Lowton Park, into that enclosure there. Anyway, this is where we are with it at the moment. So the cylinder head is back on, it's all torqued down, got the cam covers, they're just temporarily fitted at the moment, all the gaskets have been cleaned, all of the exhaust manifold is tightened up now, all the turbo systems all good. I'm going to have to get some more oil, so I'm just leaving the radiators off at the moment so we can get to that easily and change the oil filter. Up on the other side, I'm just in the throes of putting the inlet manifold on. and then we can basically get all of these kind of like ancillaries just fixed up against it, things like the throttle linkage and stuff like that. So the next stage is going to be to free off the ancillary belt down there. That will mean that we can get the new cam belt on all around here and get everything timed up and make sure that we haven't got anything horrendous going on. Once that's done, I think it's just going to be a couple of last checks, and then we can get the oil changed, and then I'll start rebuilding the front end of the radiator system. That shouldn't take too long. Okay, so most of it's together now, and I'm just having a quick good friend, the new timing belt, and we like him very much because he is not broken, so that's good. Anyway, what I've got to do now is I've taken the pulley off down the bottom there, just by taking those, you can see it on here, these 4 marks. I've marked it first so I know where it's going to go back, but it only does go on one way because it's got offset bolts in there. Anyway, that's the main crank pulley there, and you can see this is the TDC mark, which will align with the casing mark. Basically, ooh, you can't quite see it there, but there is a mark at the back. It's just peeping up, that mark at the back there on the casing. That's the TDC mark. Anyway, we're going to put the cams into their correct position in the diamond windows. So these need rotating around a little bit, and then when we've done that, we can fit the cam belt over. I'll pull the crank into the correct place down there, and then get the cam belt in the final resting place. Give it a spin and see what it's like. Well, there it is. Intercooler on, radiator on, oil filled, coolant filled, and all the electrical connections done as well. I still haven't put the drive shafts on, but I'm going to just see whether I can get it to start. Well, that's good news. We've got a starter and there's no horrendous noises in there. It's running better than it ever has, actually. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do now is get those drive shafts on. Let's get it out on the road and see what it's like. Well, we've made it. Here we are at the top of the Lone Park hill climb. I've just walked up and now I'm going to walk back down. So during the first outing at Lone Park, I managed to do a couple of runs, and then the front left output seal on the gearbox gave way and basically spilled the contents of the gearbox oil in the paddock, which wasn't great. So we're going to have a look and see what's going on there. I think it might be a shaft that's moving, a bearing maybe is gone, but we're going to split the gearbox by the epicyclic and just have a look and see what's inside and what we need to replace. So using the lift, you can get the gearbox out fairly easily. The worst bit was probably detaching the starter motor at the back there. There's a couple of little bolts which are right pig to get to. But anyway, apart from that, it was quite straightforward. What I did was I left all of the main mounts on and just disconnected the gearbox from the main mount, and then obviously took off all this suspension on this side, which made it easier. And there is the gearbox on the floor. So this is the epicyclic in here. It's this seal that was mounted on here. Basically, I've taken off this plate already, but there's a seal on the end there, and there's a bearing inside. I wonder whether that bearing has got a bit of play in it, which has caused it to move. But anyway, we need to strip off the outer casing of the epicyclic, take off all these bolts around here. Then that will split the box straight the way down this line, and then we can get at the bearings and just have a look and get some new stuff to replace it. So with those bolts all taken out, you've got two 17 mils here, a 17 mil here and here, so they're the main end caps if you like, and then these little ones down the bottom, these three here and these three on the top are 13s. This is the speedo drive, obviously the dipstick. So what we've done now is we're just going to take that away, and you can have a look inside and see what's occurring in there. So you can see basically bearing on the end, the epicyclic gear which distributes the torque, the nylon wheel is the speedo drive, another bearing on this end of it as well. And then if we just have a look inside the casing, so this is the gear here for the speedo drive, which we don't need. There's obviously been a little bit of movement, I would say. Some of these looks a little bit rough on some of these here, so whether that has been a bit of an issue, I don't know. But otherwise I think that generally looks okay in there. So let's pull out the gears and see what the bearings are doing. Now that lifts out all in one unit, dead easy, just pulls straight out. And quite rightly, as people were saying, you cannot get these bearings out unless you split the box and take the epicyclic out of there. Taper bearings, so what I'm going to do is get a new set of taper bearings each side and associated seals. Inside we've got a couple of gears off the end of the box there which are driving the epicyclic. A bit hard to see, wonder whether we can get a bit of light in there. Not brilliant at the moment. So inside the box, and you can see there, that's the main pinion for the epicyclic. All looks very clean in there. One thing I do like is just down here we've got a magnet, and that has picked up over the years a few bits of swarf, which is good, keeps it out of the gear. So I'll clean that off as well, so we've basically got something in there. Otherwise that looks nice and clean. So it's the bearings that we're interested in. We'll get those replaced. Right, I've just popped this down to my local engineering guy, Paul Atkins. Thank you very much for helping out on here. So he's basically pulled the main bearing off. This is the new one that's on, and done exactly the same down there at the bottom. That one was quite tough, he said, down there. This one didn't come off too badly. We've got the new outer taper on that, and obviously that's the bearing race there. And he's also just pushed this seal in for me as well, which is the actual drive shaft seal. So the only other two items that I've got to sort out, the spring clip which goes on the end of the drive shaft, and then that is the seal which goes around the outside of this drive shaft seal retainer, I'm going to call that. Anyway, so I'm going to just swap out this one here, and then we are ready to drop that back in there. And there it is, that's the gear set back in with the new bearings, and there's a Loctite sealer which goes around there as well, rather than a big heavy gasket. So I'll put that other casing back on top and we'll get a torque down. And there it is, that's with the housing on. These are 2.5 decimeters of torque, so you just need to tighten those up, and I've just done a crisscross pattern as I've done it so we can apply the same load on it all. So the next thing to do is to put the end housing on. There is a shim that goes in here, and there is a way of determining what your bearing load is on there. You need to refer to your installation manual really on there, but yeah, shim goes in there, and then the cap piece goes on the front of it. So with all of that bolted up, fixed back together, we're now ready to reinstall the gearbox and mate it up against the engine, and of course the four-wheel drive system with all this shit going on here. So what I'm going to need to do now is drop the car down, and then we can just have a bit of jiggery pokery and then start messing around with some bolts. Another thing to be aware of is that your release bearing is correctly located in the clutch fork basically, otherwise you'll have a world of pain and you won't have a clutch. So having got the gearbox back in and having replaced those bearings and obviously that seal that went on the end there, that stopped the leaks. However, I've still got this annoying kind of like rumbling universal joint or CV feeling between 20 and 40. After 40 it goes off and it drives quite smoothly. Up to 20 it's not so bad, but in that zone of 20 to 40 it's a very rumbly experience coming from under the car, and I'm wondering whether the prop is out of balance. However, getting that balanced is proving to be tricky. There don't seem to be many people that can actually do it for some reason. It's a three-piece prop. I've got some U-joints, which I'm gonna replace one of those anyway and just have a look and see whether that helps it at all. But yeah, I'm kind of chasing around the car at the moment, throwing money at different areas and getting nowhere. Tricky. Okay, so I've taken the prop shaft off, so all you need to do on that is undo the 6 bolts around there which go onto the front diff flange there, and then undo the 6 bolts which go onto the rear diff. The torque tube goes on here basically, but the prop shaft goes into splines, which you can't see because there's not very good lighting on that. But in any event, the whole thing then just slides off when you undo these bolts here, which are the torque tube support and the center support for the prop shaft there. So those four, it comes off a piece of absolute piss. And here it is on the bench. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press out the UJ. So there's a little circlip, you can see that on the one that I'm not taking off. So we've got circlip in here. There's 4 of those as you work your way around. I took those off while they were on the car. That made it a little bit easier. And then basically what we need to do now is just put a press into that and it should press out. What I've done is put a socket on the bottom of it, so when the UJ is pressed down it should just go straight into the socket. However, we can only go a certain amount because otherwise it's going to foul on the inside. Anyway, let's get that pressed and we can get it loosened off. Okay, so basically what you've got to achieve is just pushing it through enough that it clears out of the other side, which is simple enough now. Next thing to do is to spin it around. I can take that off now, spin it around, and then we can get the... sorry, I can't take that off. I've got to push this one out, and then the whole thing should be able to come apart, all being well. Right, so the prop shaft... basically got a spline here, there's bearing on here for the centre, so I've had all of that pulled off. This is where the universal joint basically goes on. The other one's really free. That is so free and loose and nice, but this UJ was scabby. That's the word we use, scabby. Anyway, I've had that taken off, and this is it off the car. So you can see in there you've got those splines which go on the end of the shaft. And this bearing housing goes between the UJ carrier and the shaft that we just saw. Now then, what I've done here is the rubbers had perished and failed a bit in there. I'm on a bit of a budget and a bit of a time constraint at the moment. So what I've done is the bearing actually is okay in there. But what I've done is I've filled those corrugated rubber sections which basically take the vibration out and hold the bearing carrier. That has got CT1 which I've injected into all the cavities and smoothed off, and I'm going to see what that's like, because that part you can buy. That's 305 quid. I'm just going to hang fire at the moment and see if this works. CT1 is like a rubber compound that's used in the building trade. We use it quite a lot, and I've used it on the car for bonding panels and stuff. Anyway, we're going to just have a go, see what it's like, and then I'll report back to you when the prop shaft fails and rips the car in half. And then we need to start to put the UJ back together. So what I've done is I've taken the little needle bearing caps off all 4 sides, and then we've dropped the first cap in the top here. That's held in with a circlip, but we've got to just press that down a little bit, and we don't want to go too wild because we'll just push it through the other side. So that's got to be pressed down enough that I can get the circlip on it. And these are the needle bearing caps. So you can see inside, you've got this black thing's a dust seal on here. You can see inside the needle bearings, and they're all kept in with some sticky grease, which is good. And then these are obviously the circlips which go in on the top and retain it. So I'm going to get those first two put in on the first half of the UJ. The second half, obviously, we've got to put this back together, put the knot on the end, get the splines all in, get all the bearing housing in, and then we'll attach the two UJs together and put the bearing caps in, and that'll complete the prop shaft. So you can see there the little ridge inside, and that is where the circlip's going to go into. So I'll get some pliers and we'll click that back in there, and then that'll stop the cap from popping back out again. Simple as that. Okay, so there it is. That's the first half of the UJ in, and we've got our little circlips in there, the little snap clips. And the next thing to do, once the when you've got those circlips in, it's not a bad idea just to give it a little tap, and that'll help just to seat everything down a bit. Right, so I've reassembled the other UJ carrier. So this was our first one that we did, and we put the bearing caps on, etc. I marked this up before so that we had a white mark so that I can align it the correct way. This is our centre bearing carrier, which we've modified with our good friend CTE1. Other products are available, but they're not as good as CTE1, so use CTE1 on that. That's beefed up our rubber damping, if you like, from the old one, and I've then refitted the locking nut in here, and I've put some thread locker on that as well. So the next job really is to make the two universal joints via the spider, get the cups pressed into these, and then we'll have a continuous prop shaft which we can put back on the car. This is our last cap going on now, so we'll just press that one down. You just got to make sure that the spider underneath is aligned, you know, into the cap. Obviously make sure that's in the right place before you get putting too much pressure, and you can see it just going down there and exposing the ring. So we need to do a little bit more. And then what I tend to do is just keep taking it out bit by bit, ease that off. Take it out, have a look inside, and just see how far your recess is, so that when you put the ring in there, just test it. And that at the moment is a bit tight, it just needs to go down a little bit more. So pop the socket back on it, get the press doing its work. And again, you can kind of feel it as well when it's just about, so now it's tight too. Let's try that. Yep, that's going to be good. You can see the ring is just trying to go in there. So we just need to get the circlip pliers on it. We'll just pull it all this way a little bit so we've got a bit of room. Pick up our circlip with the pliers. And then we can hopefully drop that in there. And she should sit in. Like I said before, it's worth just giving it a little tap. Just so it all kind of snaps in place. is good. Okay, kaboosh. So the next job, now that I've rebuilt the centre bearing housing and the UJ on there, we're going to put it back on the car, drop her down, and then we'll take it for a road test and see if we've eliminated that annoying vibration. Fingers crossed. So I've just been on a road test on it. The vibration massively reduced, so that's clearly the problem. Was that UJ and the centre rubber bearing holder there. Anyway, that's good news on that front. What's not such good news is that the oil cap, where are we? That little thing there, that one, is experiencing blow past. Now, it's the original cap. I wonder whether the seal on it is just not up to the job. So I'm going to get a new cap for it anyway and see whether that does it. But basically, it's just throwing a bit of oil onto the top of the cylinder head when we get up to decent revs. I think a catch tank might be a good idea on the side. I'm not convinced that the recirculation oil system is doing its job, basically. Anyway, that's good news. No horrendous leaks, it works, and we've got some turbo chatter as well. Anyway, next time hopefully we'll be at Lone Park on 18th of May, and we'll get some decent footage there so you can see it in action on the track. Okay, so one of the other issues that I've been having, and I did put a post on the Facebook group about this, is I'm getting blowback past the oil cap, which is making a right mess inside the engine. So basically we're getting this occurring every time I'm taking it out for a drive. It's blowing oil back, and all down here is oil everywhere. Yucky, yucky. Tried chasing it around and thinking that we need a new cap on here. But it's kind of like, why is it doing that? Anyway, what we've got is underneath there's a standard breather, and this little silver pipe down here is coming from the standard breather setup, which goes from the crankcase up back into the underside of the throttle body. Of course, what's happened with chucking away all of the standard hoses and fitting the silicone ones in there, clearly what's happened is that I've omitted a one-way vacuum valve, basically. So there's a breather valve. So on the current system, I haven't got that in there. On the car from the factory, when you get boost on the turbo, it's obviously putting positive pressure into the inlet rather than negative, which you get it on a normally aspirated. And then this is being pressurized and it's forcing pressure back down. You can just about see it under here. Where are we? Yep. So it's that pipe down there, the blue one, that's basically forcing pressure back down there, back down through this silver bend and down into the crankcase, massively pressurizing it all and then firing it all out through the cap up there. That's the weakest link. So what we're going to do is we're going to scrap off the feed back to there. Clearly emissions, etc., it needed that. That's going to go. We're just going to come off the end of the crankcase breather, bring it across here, and down here somewhere I'm going to mount a catch tank with a breather on top of it. And that I'm hoping will get rid of it, because there'll be no direct boost route for that pressure to go back into the engine. That should sort that out. And that is why I've been getting a bit of blue smoke coming out of the exhaust. Clearly it's been pressurizing it all and playing havoc. So I'll get that fitted and we'll have a look and see what it does. And here we are. So I've got a cheap old oil bottle there, pipe coming into it, little hole in there just to let it breathe out a little bit, and down the other end of it, it fixes back to the original, there it is, the original breather pipe back here, which went up to the throttle body. So I've bypassed that now. This ruddy great big bolt here is blanking off the pipe up to the throttle body. So that's all just a bit temporary at the moment, just so that we can test it on the road. And then hopefully that will give us some results. So what I'm looking for is that when the turbo boosts, it actually goes into the inlet manifold and doesn't go back down that tube into the crankcase, which is then blowing the oil past the oil cap. So, road test time. Well, the road test went okay. That breather system is sorted. We've got no blowback past the oil cap. So the long and short of it is that when the proper catch tank comes, I'll replace that little plastic bottle in there, get that all plumbed in properly, and we'll keep that blanked off on the throttle body return, although I have got a proper blank for it rather than just a regular big bolt. So that's good news. What wasn't such good news is that I ran out of fuel. And my brother had to come pick me up. But anyway, that's the way it goes sometimes. But at least the car is running another step closer to being good. I still have the map to sort out, so I'm hoping that Sam from Manor Performance can get online with me this week, and we can just try and adjust that annoying misfire from 4.5 grand. It just sounds like it's whacking up against the rev limiter just as the turbo's getting its legs. So that needs looking at, and then we hopefully will be ready to get it up to Lowton Park on the 18th. Well, that's another step closer. Thanks for watching this episode of Otto's Garage. Next time we'll be climbing the hill and hopefully making some at least timed runs rather than it breaking down during practice. I'll catch you soon. Stay safe. Bye bye now.
Bye bye!